I'm Felix Procacci, and I'm the Democratic candidate for Town Supervisor against Kate Murray. For those who don't know me, I'm not a politician. I have no government experience, and my only political experience is working on 3 campaigns. One for Pat Nicolosi, one for Christian McElroy back in 2009 when she ran for supervisor, and in 2011 for Gary Port when he ran for supervisor. I'm a computer programmer by trade. I have an engineering degree, and I basically do very technical work when it comes to politics. Basically, what Kate Murray often says she wants to run on her record, and so I made it a point of finding out what that record was, because she's so proud of it, and she got very upset with me when I put it on the easel at the town board meeting the other day. I don't know why. It was all very truthful. I checked the numbers 3-4 times to make sure I didn't miss anything. But this is this chart speaks to the problems that Howard Weitzman talks about in our county, and a lot of things when it comes to financial problems, they stay hidden. They don't, like, if your car breaks, you notice it's not running and makes some noise. But when finances go bad in a government that's allowed to borrow, it could go silent and people don't realize what's going on. Kate Murray, if you read her mailings, she brags about the AAA bond rating. And of course that's an important aspect of any municipality, how well your credit is, the ability to borrow. But that's basically reflected in your taxes, because the more costly it is for you to borrow because you have a lower bond rating, the higher your taxes are. So we have a AAA bond rating, so we have the best rating, so we'll get the lowest rate. But if you look at this chart, the taxes over the last 10 years of Kate Murray have gone, the tax levy, this is what she talks about. That's a total. The total has gone up from 182 million to 264 million, which is actually, I was generous to her, it's 44.9%. 44.9%. And that includes what also is not listed here, I forgot to put it in, was she reduced the workforce by 6%, roughly. So we're paying 44.9% more in taxes for 6% less workers. So if, in real terms, if you get less ice cream in a container and you're paying 44% more, you're really getting a lot, you're really paying a lot more per ounce of ice cream. So it's one of those trickeries. Kate Murray prides herself on saying that we don't deal in gimmicks, but her whole budget is full of gimmicks, and it doesn't take an auditor or a CPA, which I'm not, to figure it out. I just go through the budget books and the audits that are provided through the Freedom of Information law, and you can find out all this great information. The most troubling part of this, though, is this is your net position, which is your net assets, what you're worth. And in their own audit this year, and each audit covers a 10-year period of time, the net assets of the town has gone, when she took office, it was $133 million. And today, it's, at the close of business in 2012, is minus $19 million. And what that tells you, the audit speaks to it. It says a continually declining net position is one sign of a failing municipality, a fiscally failing municipality. So she doesn't publish this number, which is the most important number, if anything, to give residents to, if you want to really give one number to inform how well we're doing as a town financially, would be to give this position. The bondholders really care about one thing. They care about getting paid back. And you could brag about your AAA bond rating, but it in itself is not a valuable piece of information for a taxpayer. It just means that you have enough credit that people are willing to give you money because you're willing to tax indefinitely, and she's proven herself willing to tax indefinitely, 44.9% in 9 years, well over twice the rate of inflation. Where does that money go to? And that's the more troubling part. I could go on a lot about this, but One example, I went to Greenfield Cemetery with a friend who's having a problem there last week, and there were 11 men cutting down one tree. 11. 9 watching and 2 actually working. And that's just one instance, and I could give you hundreds of others of where your taxpayers' money's going. People don't mind paying taxes, I think, in my view, if you feel you're getting value for your money. If you feel they're doing the service, if they're giving you, you know, shoveling your snow, they're fixing the streets, and you're paying taxes, you're getting something. When you have 11 people cutting down one tree, that's not service. You know, that's just a waste of time. And meanwhile, we drove around the cemetery, and it was a mess. It was literally a mess. It's overgrown. They didn't pick up the leaves. The place looks like, as the girl I was with, Potter's Field. It's a weed yard, and it's a disgrace. Then we drove over to the Holy Rood to take a look at that cemetery, and for a $500 difference in a plot, you have underground water sprinklers, the grass is immaculate, a few brown patches, but that's expected in any large, you know, plot of land. But it looked like, you know, it was well maintained. And this woman is actually thinking about moving her father out of Greenfield Cemetery for that reason. We're paying a lot of money in taxes. That budget since 2008, when everybody else's salaries have been going down, that budget has gone up over 30% since 2008. That's just salaries. The salaries have gone up about 30%. So that's where your taxpayers' money is going. Thank you so much. Like people always say, well, you articulate the problem, now what's your solution to solving this problem? And my solution is very simple, is for fixing really all sorts of government, whether it's at the county level, the town level, school district level, special district level, village level, is basically getting the people involved. I think, I know people are disenchanted with government. You could see, as Tom Swazi often says, there were 350,000 people who came out to vote in 2001, and I think in 2009 he says 250,000 people. People are disinterested and they feel helpless. They feel that there's no hope, that you go to these meetings and Kate Murray makes you feel this small when you leave. You took a day off from work to go to the redistricting hearing on April 9th, and for the first time in the 3 years I've been there, everybody was given exactly 3 minutes and 1 second to wind up their statement, and that was on the official agenda. This wasn't in the miscellaneous section of the calendar at the end of the meeting. But this was a public hearing, and they gave everyone 3 minutes and 1 second. I just came over, just went to a meeting on Tuesday, and they were discussing the expansion at Roosevelt Mall, and people went on for 20, 30 minutes speaking, and nobody, the timekeeper wasn't ringing the bell. The candidate they picked for town clerk, Nasrim Ahmad, was guilty on April 9th of violating the rights of maybe 50 residents who spoke on the redistricting issue. At 3 minutes, 1 second, she banged the bell. If you talk for 10 seconds longer, she double banged the bell, violating your rights. I mean, it almost seems like I'm talking about a town race, but it feels like it's almost a national race where you're talking about civil rights and constitutional rights. But that's what we have, the problem in this town. We do have a constitutional issue because there is case law that the town has the right to make up whatever rules it wants for public speaking, but it must treat all residents equal. And there's federal case law, Shuloff v. Murphy, that I've articulated many times at town board meetings, that the federal appellate court ruled that unconstitutional, and you must give all residents equal time. And even when I went up to speak on Tuesday, they were banging the bell on me. And you know, as soon as I went up there, the first thing I said it was very nice that you were so considerate to these other speakers who spoke on the Roosevelt Mall issue, but right there at 3 minutes they started banging the bell, and when I went over they double banged the bell, and that's a violation of my constitutional rights. Their own association of towns, the organization they belong with, New York State Association of Towns, these are guidelines for villages, for towns throughout New York State. Their own guidelines say that 5-minute rule should be adhered to absolutely if there's a large number of people. Well, there was only one speaker after me on Tuesday, And the meeting ended, before 1 o'clock, so it was a short meeting. And, there was no reason for it, they just want to stifle my voice, and that's what it's all about. And that's the reason we need to get rid of this government. The way I would fix this government is, and all the governments, like I said, is making government transparent. We need rules that guide how government operates, and that's basically cameras should be at all public meetings. There's no reason not to. They're very cheap, $200 camera. They have $10,000 worth of cameras at Town Hall. They could put that in, put it up on the internet, get people involved. Next, we need to put contracts online. All the contracts, that's where we spend our money. Whether it's a public employee contract or contract to fix a road, we need to get those online and what they're gonna cost. There needs to be accountability. The day after they sign the contract, they need to put online what that contract's gonna cost the taxpayers, and they have to feel the wrath of the taxpayer immediately. It's cause and effect. They make a decision, they have to feel the taxpayer on their back. And the next thing, when they change the budget, which is where they slip in a lot of money, and this is, a lot of people don't know this, and you have to go through multiple budgets to find it, is they change the budget the day after they ratify it. And I found millions of dollars where they'll move line items around, and those amended items should be put in next year's budget in the front section so people can see how the 2013 budget has changed since it was ratified the previous year in 2012. But those three simple things, which would cost exactly no money, $0, no appropriation necessary, they refuse to do. And that's the way we're going to fix government, is getting people involved, because now people will be informed. Right now, you go to Town Hall and they'll say anything. Talking about lying, as Howard Weitzman says, they lie through their teeth. They tell you any story, and I've got them on video lying. And they'll tell you any story, any excuse, and they know you don't have the wherewithal to stay with it. You're not coming back, so what do they care? It's really sad. I mean, it was the worst, it's worse than I ever thought it would be. When I went to Town Hall 3 years ago, I went with the purpose of basically solving the problems with the flyers and stopping the dump trucks from driving around my neighborhood doing nothing, which they did. And it's grown that I've been so outraged with the way they run the place that I've been there for, I think, 67, 68 consecutive meetings. And I spoke at every one except when they had a false security alert because they didn't want to deal with the residents who were protesting the animal shelter. But I've been at every meeting, and I talk from experience. The way we're going to fix government is by making it transparent. There is no other way, because the government has to come from the people. Leaders will come and go. You might get a good leader, he'll be responsible, but who knows what the next one is. Once you give people transparency, it's like giving them Social Security. You're never going to be able to take it away. You give them something. When Franklin Roosevelt gave us Social Security, he made the people pay for it. The reason why was so government can never take it back, because it was a contentious issue back then. So he made it so that everyone had skin in the game, so they never could take back. Once you give people the freedom of knowing what their government is doing, there will be no way to repeal that law, because there'll be a public outlash. So it's very simple, it costs no money to do, and all government officials that I've spoken to do not want to implement it. But that's what's really necessary if we're going to fix government, not for just our generation, but for the future generations. So we're not based on the fact that a leader will come and go and go take the wrong path. So that's about it. If anyone has any questions.
Felix, do you know how much the town has in cash reserves?
In cash reserves, it has in the general fund, as of the close of 2012, is $30 million, and that is down from $60 million in the last, I think, 4 years. I want to talk about reserves, but that's a very complicated issue. There's actually 4 major reserve funds. It's a general fund, there's in the parks fund, the highway, and I forget what the other one is. But altogether, it's about $135 million, which they tell you that they have this in surplus, but the fact of the matter is, by law, $35 million of that dollars is not spendable. They have to have it by law. They would basically go into deficit. what the town has spent, as you can see from the chart here, these deficits, these are when we dipped into the reserves. It's $36 million over the last 3 years. We've dropped the reserves, and that comes, I believe, out of the general fund. It's not that easy to find out all the numbers because they're buried, you know, the audit is not explicit, but they give the general ones. It's about 135 million, I think, total reserves, but it's in different funds. That can't be, you can't use a highway reserve fund for the Parks Department.
So do you think as supervisor, you would have the possibility of replacing the $17 million tax levy with cash reserves?
The $17 million tax levy,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. What are you talking about, the $17 million?
Well, it's a figure that Larry gave me. I guess he's at a no.
The money that comes from charging the tax base is roughly $17, $18 million. It's divided by the 4 classes, about 12 plus million for single-family homes.
Are you talking about the tax levy for the property tax is $264 million. Is that what you're talking about, the property tax levy for all the properties in the town?
One of the budgets the town had showed was a $17 million. After they did all their expenses, they had $17 million. It was $12 million went to class 1, and then the other $5 million was divided up into 2, 3, and 4. So the intent of the question was, if it was that, they're raising $17 million from the taxpayers, and they're sitting on $100 million in spendable reserves, which is really taxpayer money overcharged and not spent, after you take away the stuff they can't touch, could you take that money and reduce the tax levy by giving the people back their money and possibly reducing or eliminating the tax levy?
Okay, first, I'm not sure about what that $17 million is, but as far as paying back, you know, using money right at this stage of the game, the way, unless you start changing the trajectory of the way the budget's going, there wouldn't be a way of doing that, because what you're seeing here with the net position, I mean, I didn't explain it very clearly. That's your assets minus your liabilities. And right now the town is sitting on about $625 million of long-term debt that's owed for future retirees and current retirees, you know, healthcare, pension, you know, whatnot. So the problem with trying to use reserves to reduce taxes at this state of the game is you're just going to worsen that net position by trying to give back money. First, before you could start saying a real reduction in taxes, Kate Murray, what she's doing is it's a shell game. When she's talking about, like in her most recent mailing, reducing the taxes, you know, when she talks about how she reduced the taxes, she's not telling you really the whole story. Part of it is the fact that because of the housing recovery, this total tax levy for the town, this $400 million here, which includes the property tax levy over here, plus the mortgage tax, plus the sales tax, which comes from, you know, Nassau County is the sales tax, and the mortgage tax comes from the state, plus there's franchise tax, and I think there's something else, some other revenue, which the comptroller refused to explain to me, which is $80 million, but he couldn't tell me where it's coming from, which I think it might be fees, but, you know, it's in some sort of archaic accounting terms that I didn't understand. But what happens is when the Nassau County gives us, let's say, $5 million more in sales tax revenue, and Kate Murray holds the line on taxes, what is she doing with that $5 million? She's spending it. Now, when the sales tax revenue goes down or the mortgage tax goes down, now you have to make it up by increasing property taxes. And that's really where the trick is. She's not really holding the line on taxes, because if you look at the total tax levy from the town, it's gone up every year since 2003. There's never been a reduction or freeze. What's gone up was the mortgage revenue, the sales tax revenue. So she's using that money to hold the line on property. But that's not financial wizardry. If I give you $3 million, now you could now spend $3 million, or you could give a reduction to other people that, you know.
Take the money and run like that.
Yeah, well, that's what she does. But she's not telling you a complete story. And my idea of fixing government is telling people the complete story, because if you understood how this works, as opposed to this, which doesn't tell a complete story, people will make the decision and throw you out of office. And that's what I'm counting on, is that I feel the residents of the town, the residents of the state, the residents of the country are smart enough to understand things. They're just never told the truth. They're told this misinformation from their politicians. We pay for this. We pay about $4 million to get these in the mail, and it's misinformation. It's not from, 11 people to cut down a tree is not the lowest possible cost that she puts in this brochure. And if you question on it, you get belled and you get, stifled, and that's not right. So,
Doesn't Kate Murray always say that she keeps the property tax level? Isn't that part of her talk every year? Yet that doesn't.
yeah, well, you could see that, you have to realize that a budgeted number and an actual number are different. If you notice these numbers, I know it might be small, but there's always 2 consecutive years that's like 217 and 218, and then 228 and 229. But there was a jump between 218 and 220. There's a $10 million jump, and then there's 2 years that are very similar. Those are her tax freezes in between her elections, and she notice the borrowing has gone up steadily. The debt service has gone up, and the borrowing has gone up, which is also used, which is another complicated thing to really know where the money's going without doing a forensic audit. Some of that borrowing goes into the highway reserves. So like when you say using the reserves, that reserves may have come from borrowing, but I have no way of knowing that based on just the documents that I've analyzed. It would require a real forensic audit to analyze this stuff. I'm getting really in depth here, and it's really hard to explain in a simple way, but the net, like I said, essentially by giving the critical parameters, we could explain it in a simple way. The net position is a very important thing. If it's steadily declining over time, that's a signal things are going wrong. If she put that in her brochures, the people would take action and say, why is this? And things would change. I believe she would either change her government or she'd be fighting for her political life, if she didn't. But because all of this is kept in secret, and most residents, I bet you never, how many people saw this before? I mean, anyone? But this should be common, I would put this out if I was supervisor, because once again, I'm not going to live forever, but I want a legacy in government where what I put in place will outlast, even if I serve one term, that the next supervisor will be required to do this. And once you require the supervisor to do this, how are you going to take this away from the people? How could they ever vote in a public meeting and say, we're not going to give this to the people anymore. We're not going to give a 10-year chart of how the taxes have gone up, how the spending's gone up, how the employment has gone down, and the cost per government unit is going up, dramatically. Like I said, if you account for the decrease, the 6% decrease in employment, that's close to a 45, probably a 50% tax increase when you take into account the decrease in employment in government in the town.
On that net position, I happen to be an accountant.
Sure.
And I don't know the answer to this, but when I see that net position, that chart on the net position, which went in that red minus 19, it's possible that at some point the town was required to change their accounting procedures and book like a pension cost or whatever, and I don't know if that's what
You're actually right. You're absolutely right.
So that really is,
That-
but
yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
apples to apples, then you should really
No, but
disclose that.
oh no, but it is. But at each point here, they are disclosed. They had to put their long-term position as.
Well, in other words, you're saying the pension cost for all those years
Was always there.
Okay.
Yeah, because they always had what's happened. Because if you've noticed what's happened to your taxes, especially, or what's happened to government since 2008, when all the rest of the private sector their salaries have been going down, either actual salaries or the fact that their healthcare costs they've been having to absorb more and more of their healthcare costs, more and more of their retirement costs. The public sector, especially in the town, where they pay, as the audit of Comptroller Dinopoli showed, they're paying 40% more in wages for the people who work in the animal shelter as compared to other municipal shelters. So they're responsible for their long-term employment costs. When you increase the salaries, which they have, of everybody across the board, I'm not telling you giving raises to the $30,000 workers. The last contract they signed, they gave across-the-board raises to all workers, regardless of when they were hired pre-1974, where they got great benefits. After 1974, they've got okay, but very good benefits. And 2013, where everybody's on tier 6 now and got a lot less, have to contribute to their own retirement. There was no distinguishing between the different employee groups. They all got across-the-board raises, and when I asked the question on April 23rd, how much is this contract going to cost the taxpayer, Kate Murray had no answer. She said, we don't have those figures. But she still doesn't have those figures. I mean, now how many months later when I asked the same question, she still has no answer, and they don't want to tell you. If they had to tell you on April 24th, after they ratified the contract, now this contract's going to cost this many tax dollars for you for so many years, that would change the way they do business. And that, my feeling, is the only way to feel the wrath of the voters, is the only way to fix government. So that's it.
Okay.
I know Henry
I think you all get a sense of the passion that Felix brings to what might otherwise be considered a dry subject of finance. But at the end of the day, that dry subject hits us all in the pocketbook and affects the quality of life in the town of Hempstead.